My name's Kevin Talbot. I'm Professor of Neurology in Oxford, at the University of Oxford, and Head of the Nuffield Department of Clinical Neurosciences. 25 years ago, I founded the Oxford Motor Neuron Disease Clinic and Centre. So I think when we set out on the project of trying to understand more about the genetic basis of motor neuron disease in our clinic population, we began to realise that this was a group of people who could really help us in understanding what's happening before the disease actually really begins, in the sense that it would present to a neurologist. So it's what we call the preclinical or pre-symptomatic phase. So by studying people in that phase, we feel there's a much higher chance of finding ways to treat the disease before it really causes irreversible neurological damage. And that's one of the big challenges when people are already in the clinic. The drugs required to block the pathways that are activated in the nervous system that are damaging it are at present a little bit beyond our grasp, although lots of progress has been made. So treating the nervous system before it gets irreversibly damaged is a key thing. So to do that, we need partners. We need partners who are going to be willing to join us in our research and allow us to study them, to see what's going on. And so FaTHoM is an initiative which is about developing that partnership between us as researchers and people who have lived experience of motor neuron disease through their family and are at risk through their own genetic heritage. So if you take other diseases of mid to late life, such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, these are lumped together with motor neuron disease as neurodegenerative conditions. And it's very clear in Parkinson's disease that maybe 20 years before people might develop the classical motor symptoms of Parkinson's, disabled people, there are other things that are going on. They have problems with their bowels, they have problems with their smell and their sleep. So in motor neuron disease, we have not been able to detect up to now anything that's going on that would allow us to sort of say, well, something's going on before classical motor neuron disease. People seem really very normal. They're leading very healthy, very active lives. So we've therefore gone to the tissues that are inside people's bodies, taken some fluid from their blood, from their spinal fluid, to see what's going on biochemically. And we have been able to see the first signs that perhaps we can distinguish people who might go on and develop motor neuron disease from those who won't, perhaps years before the condition actually develops. And that would allow us to begin to explore the biology of that phase, but also to do trials in that period, and also to try and initiate treatments at the right time when the disease is actually sort of taking off. You can't really imagine ever taking somebody with a genetic mutation and treating them in childhood, for example. That would be decades before the disease begins, and all drugs come with risks. So we need to find that period of evolution, which goes from the sort of stable situation where you're carrying a genetic mutation but nothing's wrong, where things start breaking down. And that's the period we're really looking for. We're beginning to get some glimpses of that, both through body fluids and the biochemistry in those, but also from doing sophisticated sorts of imaging, such as magnetoencephalography, where we can see the patterns of the brain, the way that the different networks of large numbers of nerve cells are behaving and oscillating. So we already have the first clues that this kind of project will ultimately allow us to do that. So it's very clear from talking to people who come to this meeting that they value hugely direct contact with researchers. It actually allows them to feel that the world might change, that there are people who are interested in helping them and changing them and working with them. They become better informed, and that helps engage them in the project we are doing as partners. But we also learn a huge amount as researchers, particularly junior researchers who don't normally, they're not doctors, they don't normally get to talk to patients, so they are sitting down and interacting with people who really have a huge stake in what they're doing, and that brings meaning for them. And even though I've had decades of experience of motor neuron disease, I always learn something new about the experience that people have of motor neuron disease. So just listening to people's individual stories over tea or coffee is always very powerful and informative, and I go away, with something new each time. So I think there's a very complementary relationship going on of exchange of ideas and engagement, which is fundamental, and I think is a real model for how this sort of thing should be done, I feel.